everyone, welcome to our Yes4EU Hustings webinar. Thanks for joining us. We're delighted to welcome fantastic speakers this evening, Alex Cole-Hamilton and Sarah Masson, who are candidates in Edinburgh Western constituency for the Scottish Parliament. More from them shortly. Let me just introduce Yes4EU a little bit first. I'm Maura, convener of Yes4EU. We're a grassroots group campaigning for independence and for Scotland to join the EU. The clue's in the name, really. We're not aligned to any particular party, any political party, but we are collaborative, so we collaborate with other pro-independence and pro-EU groups locally and nationally. You may have seen us out in action in the latter half of 2020 on the streets of Edinburgh mostly, you know, in the days when we could still do those things. We were small numbers and social distance, but we got, you know, a lot of sharing of images on social media. So that's the way to do it. On 31st of December, that was the last time we were actually out actively campaigning outdoors. We had a peaceful presence at Holyrood to mark the end of the Brexit transition period. In a spirit of defiance, not sadness, although it is pretty distressing, but we were defiant. We had hashtag "We didn't vote for this." We got widespread media coverage for that action, which you may have seen our pictures in the papers, so local, national and international newspapers and online papers. So we're looking forward to the easing of COVID restrictions, obviously for many reasons, but for one thing, we'll be able to get out campaigning on the streets again in the run up to elections, even though it probably won't be for very long that we're able to do that. If you're not already a Yes4EU member, do consider signing up via our website or using the link that was in your Eventbrite email, and we'll put some links in the chat in a minute as well. A recording of this event will be available afterwards as well, so you know, do share it with friends, contacts who've missed it live. We've also got another hustings webinar in March coming up, this time focusing on Edinburgh Southern constituency. So look out for news about that beyond social media, Twitter and Facebook when we get a date sorted, middle of March. So that's just about enough for me, but I just want to say thanks very much for all the questions you've sent in. Fantastic questions and lots of them, so we can't ask them all. So we've been looking at them and going through and trying to find a balance, you know, about local issues, national issues. And your question may not be asked because we've got lots of them. So hope you're not too worried about that, but hopefully most of the serious issues will come up. So thanks for the questions and thanks to the Yes4EU team. That's Sam, Elise, David and Leslie. And Leslie's going to introduce the speakers and take charge of the proceedings. So over to you, Leslie.
Hi, thank you. And thank you to Sarah and Alex for joining us today. Sarah Masson and Alex Cole-Hamilton are both candidates for Edinburgh Western in the forthcoming May elections for the Scottish Parliament. And today we're going to find out a little bit from each of them about what they will do as an MSP for this constituency and in the wider context of Scottish politics. And also they will answer some of your questions. Could people please put the questions in the Q&A? We will ask questions that have been sent in beforehand and questions that come from the Q&A during the session. Both candidates are going to be given 5 minutes to speak, and then we'll ask them both some questions. So can we start with Sarah?
Yes, and hopefully you can all hear me just now. So hi, and thank you, and hello to everyone who's joining in on this call tonight. I think this is our first Zoom hustings, so it's going to be a new experience for us all, and it's definitely my first Zoom hustings as well that I've spoken at for this election. So fingers crossed everything goes well technology-wise. I suppose the biggest benefit, to be fair, from the organiser side is that they can just mute the politicians when we inevitably speak for longer than we're probably meant to. But I promise that I'm going to try and keep to time tonight. I'm really glad though that we're still able to organise events like this and that everyone joining in tonight can still have the opportunity to ask us questions about the issues that are most important to you. So thank you for coming along tonight. And thank you, Sam, Morag, David, and everyone else who's helped organise tonight. It's really, really appreciated. This is going to be an incredibly unusual election, and I have no doubt that that is something that you will hear a lot before May. But it is. And that's not just because we're not able to be out and about campaigning in the ways we usually do, but it's also because it's about electing MSPs and a government that are going to be leading the rebuild of our country, of our jobs, our industries, our schools, and our communities, fundamentally our lives. And whilst that can sound quite overwhelming, it's also really exciting. I think it was actually Albert Einstein that said, in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. And that's what this election is about. It's about which party, about which person do you think will seize the opportunities that lie ahead of us and create the type of place that you want to live. Whether that be about addressing issues that the pandemic has highlighted around employment rights, around mental health, around social security, or finding tangible, workable solutions to more local, long-standing issues, like the transport and pollution problems across so many different parts of the west of Edinburgh. Myself and the SNP want us to be able to recover and rebuild our country to the best it possibly can be for all of us after the pandemic, and believe that this process should not be confined. I don't believe that we should have to dampen our ideas for the future by having to think about what is possible whilst we are tied into a UK government that is hell-bent on shutting itself off from our closest European neighbours, with hostile immigration policies, damaging trading arrangements, and the loss of some incredibly important and beneficial partnerships. I want us to be able to listen, consider, and explore all of the ambitious ideas we've heard people speaking about over the last year, and to be open to out-of-the-box thinking. The past year, we as a country, individuals with our friends and families, have been talking about the benefits of things like a universal basic income or a national care service. These are some of the ideas that we need to be exploring. We've also seen industries and jobs hit hard over the past year by both COVID, but made worse by Brexit. And we must listen and work with the sectors that have been hit hardest to find the best way forward for them. All of this is how we can rebuild our country to be the best it possibly can be. We can see the work that the SNP has got on with since being in government, whether that be the new Queensferry High School or the new homes in Muirhouse, or having access to the best performing A&E services, or the brilliant Queensferry crossing. The SNP have used the powers that we have to build a fairer, greener, more just country for us all. But it's now time to build on that. And as we look to do that, we must be allowed to look at what is possible within our current constitutional arrangement outside of the EU, and what is possible within other arrangements where Scotland can reap the benefits of EU membership. We deserve to be able to ask ourselves that question, and voting SNP will give you, it will give all of us that right to decide what our future should be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and exactly on time. Well done. Oh, there you go. Now over to you, Alex.
Well, thank you very much, and Chair, and indeed Sarah, it's lovely to see you. I'd like to start by thanking you for the invitation. I've not really prepared anything. I've just come straight from Parliament, a Sky News interview, and prepping for tomorrow's big evidence session, which we won't go into just now. But I was keen to come tonight because I don't think there's enough of this kind of discourse in our politics. I mean, I'm probably the only no voter in this webinar, and that's okay, because I think it's right that we should have these kind of debates about what makes me a no voter and what makes you a yes voter. But I would say that there is more in common than divides us. And actually, if I look around some of the faces on the screen, I have met you before in many of the sort of pro-Remain rallies and marches that we all attended over the last 2 years. And that's because my European identity is still really important to me. My first speech to the Scottish Parliament happened on a day which marked a special anniversary for my family. On that day, 100 years previously, my great-granduncle, a private in the 1st Canadian Mounted Rifles out of Saskatchewan, was killed along with 80% of his battalion on the first day of the Battle of Montserrat on the Ypres salient. His name is Alexander Bennett, and I am named for him. That a generation later, 2 of my grandfather's 4 siblings were killed again in European battlefields. And Chair, I think it a measure of the success of this European project that I am only the 2nd generation in the recorded history of my entire family to never have to contemplate war in Europe. It is a comfort I would extend to my children and theirs to come. So Brexit broke my heart, and I fought tooth and nail against it. I am in a party that threw everything for a people's vote and also electoral success. We threw away electoral success with our last-ditch attempt to revoke Article 30. It was the right thing to do, but perhaps the public were just not ready to hear it. We are still, despite what you may have heard, a party of rejoin, but not quite yet. And I will come on to why that is. And that is because right now, above all things, we have to put the recovery first. Our nation is exhausted by Brexit, by the pandemic and what is to come in terms of the economic firestorm, jobs losses, the impact on our businesses and our people and our mental health, that we really need to start focusing on what matters in terms of the local recovery and the national recovery within Scotland, because that is going to dominate everything for many years to come. It doesn't mean that we give up on Europe, far from it. Very soon after New Year's Eve, when Brexit first took hold, we could see the hideous calamity it was going to be. It's now incumbent on pro-Europeans to fight for that and to bring Britain back into the EU, because I want Britain back in the EU. I don't see this as a choice between 2 unions. I don't accept that. I wouldn't meet the loss of one union I care about by jettisoning the other union I care about. But we're not just here to talk about Europe. I want to be your MSP again because I love my job. Nothing about it disappoints me. I have helped over 15,000 residents in West Edinburgh since I was elected. And I have fought tooth and nail to make sure that your issues in our community are at the forefront of people's minds when decisions are being made in Holyrood. Whether that's making sure that people turning up on the platform at Dalmeny train station, when for months on end, carriages were just sailing past filled with commuters, forcing people to take their cars onto our already congested arterial roads. Whether it's about saving our zoo in the teeth of lockdown, prevailing on the First Minister to allow it to open a month earlier than previously to assure its survival. And that is going to continue as a result of this. I've done things on a national level as well, whether that's fighting for the rights of new parents in lockdown, recognising perinatal mental health and the impact of lockdown on perinatal mental health, or reversing £150,000 funding cut to HIV Scotland, just at a time when HIV is taking hold in Glasgow once again for the worst it's ever been since the 1980s. It was me that first highlighted the drug death emergency and the 23% cut to drug and alcohol services brought about by this SNP government. As I said at the top of my remarks, there is more that unites us than divides us. And I see that in Sarah. And much of what she said in her speech, I absolutely agree with, save one. And that is that I just don't believe our country is either ready or willing for another divisive pull for independence. And I say this because even though people will absolutely, I recognize that the last 20, 30 polls have been in favor of independence. When you ask people how important is it to them, it's minuscule. 22% of people in this country will put independence within their top 3 asks of governing parties going into this election. It is not on people's radar right now. We need to put the recovery first. So the things that people ask about are the health, the economy, the educational attainment gap, and particularly mental health. We had a mental health crisis in this country before COVID. It's only getting worse. I think my time is up. I think you're on mute, Chair.
Yes, exactly. Your time was up exactly when you said. Thank you very much, both, for keeping to time and for giving us a nice overview of where you're at. I think we can go to questions. You want to start, David, by asking one of the questions that came in?
First one then. Could both candidates outline the route and how long it will take for Scottish citizens to regain their rights as European citizens?
Sarah, you can go first since you went first.
We'll take it turn about.
Yeah.
Sorry, so to outline the route, I mean, the route is already starting to be established. You know, the European Union understands that Scotland voted to remain in the EU. And I know that from speaking to MEPs who were over there, from the LibDem MEPs to the SNP MEPs, after that vote in 2017, it really shone out to lots of members in the European Parliament how different Scotland was, and that Scotland voted to remain. They know that, and they were working with our MEPs over there, talking about how to rejoin, and our Scottish government also keeps up the ties with them on that. In terms of what we need to do to prepare for that, obviously a referendum about Scottish independence and everything needs to come. However, there are things that we can put in place, and it's things that the Scottish government are already looking into, and that's about making sure we're already aligned with a lot of their structures, single market things, custom union, making sure all these things are in place, and so they can go hand in hand when it comes to us finding, as an independent country, our future relationship with the EU. Because it's every single country that has rejoined the EU, that has joined the EU, we will be the first one to rejoin the EU if that happens. Every single country that has joined the EU has done it on a deal by deal basis. You know, there have been countries in various different situations, and every single time it has been about how can we make this work? How can we make this happen? So I think making sure we're aligned as much as possible is fundamental to that. And then we just need to democratically get our way to be able to take the next steps there.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And to Alex.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Well, I mean, that's a lovely thought. I mean, I wish it was that simple, but it isn't, sadly. Let's say there's an independence referendum at the end of this year or the beginning of next. And the sort of most conservative estimate, well, this is what the estimate was given to us in 2014, that it takes 2 years then following that to agree terms for our separation from the United Kingdom. So we're back, you know, we're talking about 2024, potentially the beginning of 24 that we actually leave the UK. That's fine, okay, and if that's happened, that's happened. I think then that a referendum on, you would have to have another referendum on whether this newly formed independent Scotland was going to join the EU. I don't imagine that would begin during those sort of divergence period, that transition period that we would be in, that took us up to 2024. And then you've got the campaign for around that, so it's probably another year to hold that. So it's 2025 before we have a referendum. So great, Scotland wants to go back into the EU. Brilliant. However, as Sarah rightly said, it is a different story for every nation. I mean, the fastest accession that we have seen was Croatia, which I believe applied for membership in 2003 and got there in 2013. That's 10 years. That's 10 years. And let's remember that the Maastricht convergence criteria ask that we have a GDP of 3%, a structural deficit of 3% or less. At the moment, ours is 8.6%. So it would take a long time. We would need to take some very tough fiscal decisions about our spending and our borrowing and our taxation in order to even just get to the races for consideration. I'm not saying that Scotland couldn't ever be a member of the EU, but we would not get special treatment because Sarah suggests that we're rejoining. We won't be rejoining. We'll be a new state, a new applicant state. And the second thing, this is also very important about the problem with that journey, is that at the moment the SNP, and it's the SNP who are driving independence, and if they win and they're in government, this is their policy, have stated that in terms of currency, we will sterlingize, that we will be using the currency of another nation, a nation that is not a member state of the EU. That is unacceptable to the European Union. Because if we are using if we're using sterling, then we are absolutely subservient to the interest rate set by the Bank of England. We wouldn't have our own central bank in those circumstances. And again, that's a red flag to the EU. So it's not quite that lovely vision that Sarah paints of being just drifting in almost the next day following independence. I'm not saying my version's any easier. It's not, because mine, it involves bringing the whole of the UK back into European Union membership.
Sorry, can I come in? So what sort of timing do you think that? Because obviously you gave a very specific timing for what you thought Scotland would be. So what timing do you think the UK would be?
Well, I don't think it would particularly be any faster, put it that way. But it would be without the economic pain, that's for sure. Because we wouldn't need to leave the UK. We wouldn't need to have austerity on stilts and massive income tax rises to pay down our structural deficit, because the UK structural deficit is nothing like Scotland's. So as such, we wouldn't have the economic pain. It wouldn't necessarily be any faster, and it would all be contingent on people like you and people like me who care about Europe and care about our European identity, absolutely spelling out, delineating the hideous calamity of Brexit that there is. And we already see that in opinion polls right now, that Remain would win, even today, even back into the European Union. People recognize the mistake that they made. But it's about winning that democratic argument. And that, there are many sort of foothills and potholes along the way to that. But I believe that's the way for me.
Right, I think we should go on to the next question. So there's one here from Morag MacDonald from Edinburgh West, and she's asking for both of you, in what ways do you think Brexit will affect people and businesses, specifically in West Edinburgh? What resolutions can you offer to mitigate these main impacts? And Alex, I can put that to you first.
Well, I think it's a good question, Morag. I think we've probably seen some of that already. I think in terms of the difficulties of red tape that have been caused by the bureaucracy that exists at any of our land or sea borders with the EU, and all that means in terms of freight and getting the machinery and the supply chain moving as quickly as it could do. I think it will probably have an impact on tourism. But the real problem that we've got right now is it's very difficult to disaggregate what's been caused by Brexit and what's been caused by the pandemic, because actually the pandemic has come like a 900-pound gorilla smashing through everything, every economy in the world. And it's really difficult to actually say. And that's really frustrating for me as a European, because I want to be able to point to this and say, this is rubbish. And it's really rubbish. And we told you it's really rubbish. But the Tories are going to say, oh, of course, that's nothing to do with Brexit. This is all about the pandemic, and it might not be like this for years to come. And it's and so to answer your second point, what do we do to mitigate? Well, I mean, we're actually our mitigation against the impact of the pandemic is going to mop up any problem that Brexit has caused, because that is so Leviathan right now.
And Sarah, please.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with a lot of what Alex said there either. I mean, what I would, in terms of people, how this is impacting people's lives, jobs is probably the biggest one that we're looking at here. So with the industries that are being affected, there are then jobs, right across with people who live right across Edinburgh Western, who's going to feel that, whether they work in tourism, whether they work in agriculture or food, or one industry that I want to highlight specifically at this point as well is the arts, who are having absolutely appalling time of it. The arts is incredibly important to the city, let alone Scotland, and with things like the Fringe and everything. And this 100% can be put down to Brexit and not COVID at this point. The fact of the matter is, touring visas at the moment for artists coming into this, EU artists coming into this country, and artists and everyone who works backstage that no one ever speaks about as well, exiting this country, trying to go to the EU. We don't have an arrangement there. You've got the National Theatre saying that they can no longer tour their shows because of how much it's going to cost them. And the EU proposed a deal that would allow visa-free travel for performers and artists. The UK government turned that down. That's a deal that, you've got like Sir Ian McKellen and everything hyping up, going, this is a disaster. Everyone in the arts warned you this was going to happen. You were offered a solution and you've turned it down. This needs to be addressed now. And And I mean, the solution that I can offer you at this point is we should rejoin the EU, and I will campaign for that to happen. But failing that, again, keeping as much as we can aligned with a lot of what they're doing and keeping our ties with them. And it's work that I know, you know, we've got our Minister for Europe, you've got cabinet secretaries, including people like Fiona Hislop for the arts and Fergus Ewing for the agriculture. They're trying to hold on to these ties with everything. And that's part of what we need to do, so that when we're ready to start joining back up, everything's in place for it.
Thank you. Do you want to ask the next question, David?
Sure. So as Morag indicated in the introduction, we've had quite a lot of questions around local issues around transport. So I think rather than go through them one by one, we'll maybe have a composite question, because the sorts of points that have been raised range from, you know, Queen's Ferry Road having the highest levels of air pollution in the city, to questions about what's your view on the council's proposed low traffic neighbourhood plans, specifically for East Craigs, to people observing recent accidents on the temporary spaces for people schemes, both to pedestrians and cyclists, and again asking for your views. So let's take all that as a composite and deal with it as a oneer. What are your views on the LTN and spaces for people proposals from the council?
Do you want to go first on this one, Alex? Or Sarah, sorry, it's your turn to go first, so yeah.
No, it's absolutely fine. So speaking about everything more broadly, I mean, it is undeniable, and I'm sure Alex and I would both agree on this as well, that there is traffic, transport and pollution problems right across Edinburgh West, and that needs to be addressed. What needs to be at the heart of all of this is public transport, active travel, the current transport that's coming through, but most crucially is community engagement, possibly above all of this. And there needs to be a joined up approach between all of this. Now, there is various things obviously going on with the LTN, with East Craigs and everything like that. And if you know, your MSP, if I was elected your MSP, I would have been making sure your voices were heard and that as well. And Alex was doing the same thing. Where we possibly differ is I would have liked a more constructive approach with the council, because I think there seemed to me to be a clash that it just felt like two loggerheads going at it, as opposed to trying to find some outcomes and solutions here. Now, what we've got at the moment is a consultation that opened, I think, 2 days ago about a lot of the measures being implemented right across the city. It's a consultation that I'll possibly send the organisers the link to, and you could send it to people, because I think we need to get that spread out as widely as possible so that we are hearing everyone's views about what's going to be proposed in the future for all of these areas, because that seemed to be the biggest problem by far, that local people were not feeling heard. And I would hope, and understandably, people were incredibly passionate about this and about the impact it was going to have on their lives locally. So what I would hope to do is to try and get everyone to be speaking to each other around a table. I think, because everyone knows there is problems here. I don't think anyone would deny that. It's the solutions that we possibly have differing ideas about. And we know that we've got more and more people coming into the city, and there's going to be more houses built as well, because we need that, because the population of Edinburgh is increasing. And as that's happening, we need to make sure that we've got infrastructure in place that deals with all of this. So the new measures are temporary. They've been put in, they're all temporary. The consultation that's open is about the future and going forward. So that's where we need to be hearing everyone's voices. What's working, what's not? What maybe just needs a little tweak? Could we expand on something? These are all the ideas that we need to be looking at. And that would be my focus anyway.
Thank you, Sarah. Now, Alex?
Thank you for that. It's a good question. There's a lot there, a lot to unpack. Sarah says that these changes, well, Sarah said there was a clash, and there was a clash. And the clash was caused for two reasons. Firstly, these changes weren't temporary to begin with. The LTN was originally designed to be permanent, using the COVID emergency to road test a project that has been successful in other parts of Europe and indeed other parts of Britain. But the problem is they didn't give anybody a proper say in it. They just said, look, this is going to happen as part of the COVID emergency. We're going to close a number of streets, and we're going to have a bus gate and a range of other measures. And they didn't bring anyone to the table. And this is when we're talking about who we're talking about here, we're talking about 3,500 homes in East Craigs and Quaidmount. This has never been done anywhere else in the city, but that's what they did. And with it, I didn't even know it was happening until I woke up one morning and had 2,500 emails in my inbox. And when you're the MSP for the area, you have to react to that. Now, I don't have a problem with low traffic, the idea of low traffic neighborhoods or spaces for people. In fact, the Liberal Democrats have supported 85% of spaces for people initiatives across the city. What I do have a problem with is doing something that demonstrably and fundamentally changes the quality of life for residents in my area without them having their say. And it was only because I called on the SNP Council to come to the table, as Sarah said, that we got the permission of Police Scotland and the Justice Secretary to have a socially distanced rally in Gyle Park, to which 1,000 people came and heard the views of local residents. It was only because of that that the council leadership recognised they'd got this incredibly wrong, and thankfully finally have stepped down from the ladder of that and are putting through this consultation that Sarah rightly says. I should say, on the LTN in East Craigs, I don't think it should be responded to by everyone. I think it should be responded to by the people it will be affecting, because I think that's really, really key. But there are some really good suggestions. One of the most frustrating things for me about that whole debacle is there were some really clever ideas in that LTN, but 80% of it was mince, and the people who lived there could tell you it was mince, because actually if you put a bus gate on Craigs Road, and everyone who lives in the Buchan estate will have to funnel down past Maybury or Barnton, putting pressure on two of the most polluted arterial routes in the country, and it was only going to make a bad traffic problem worse. So there are many other things that we can do, and I take pollution seriously. That is why one of the first things I fought for and won was the airport bus link along the A90, which goes up the Skylink 200 that goes through Blackhall and up Park Road. And the idea of that is two things. Firstly, to give another arterial service, airport service, which reduces the number of cars going to the airport, but it also stops car dumping in Corstorphine, because people living in the north side of the city were going on holiday and leaving their cars in residential streets around Corstorphine and causing a nightmare, causing generally a public safety issue, because you can't get fire tenders or ambulances through the feather halls if everybody's parked there. I passionately believe in active travel. I'm a cyclist myself, and have called repeatedly for this council to do more to upgrade our cycle lanes, to make sure that the existing cycle path network that we have is properly gritted and properly lit, especially during the winter. I, to my electoral cost at the last Scottish election, supported the East-West link-up at Roseburn. I lost a lot of votes for that, but you know what? It was the right thing to do, and I would still do it today. So yeah, I don't think you'll find disagreement between Sarah and I on the need to reduce traffic and reduce pollution, but you've got to bring hearts and minds with you, and the SNP Council just didn't do that in the LTN in East Craigs.
Thank you very much, again, both of you. This is a question from Alex Sharp. And I think it's a very good question, and I might broaden it out a bit. So the question was, Edinburgh Western has very different, very affluent areas and impoverished areas. What will you do as an SNP to tackle the wide gap between the rich and the poor in our community? As a constituent in Muirhouse, it sometimes feels like we are forgotten. But I think that, you know, we can broaden that out to sort of Scotland in general, how you tackle the gap. Alex, you can go first this time.
Well, firstly, I love Muirhouse. I'm proud to represent it. I actually spent much of the first lockdown in Muirhouse. I can't sit still at the best of times, and I can't stay at home at the best of times. So I joined Scran Academy and delivered 1,700 meals to Muirhouse to people who are shielding in self-isolation with COVID-19. It's a dynamic community, and it is often neglected. It makes me angry how often it is overlooked. This SNP government has had 14 years, and Muirhouse is still in the top 4 in the Scottish indices of multiple deprivation. Something is not going right. Now, there are many things. You can't just throw money at this problem. For me, it's about education. Education is the silver bullet. Education is the route out of poverty. Investing in education and bringing our education system, particularly in our deprived areas, back up the international rankings where we used to be before the attainment gap hit, before the SNP hit, I have to say, because this is a blot on their copybook, a massive blot on their copybook. That without that fundamental investment, making education a profession of choice, making sure that teachers have jobs to go to. It's ironic that if you're a probationary teacher right now, you can't get a job, but our class sizes are still over 30 in most cases. This is a government that came saying we'll have class sizes lower than 20 in 2007. We're nowhere near that. Education is the route out of poverty, and is the route into social mobility. For me, that's the fundamental.
Thank you. And Sarah.
Thank you. Whilst I don't disagree with everything you just said, Alex. So, let's find the points that we agree on. I do think education has a role to play in it. But I mean, what I would say is, it's not just about, when we're looking at education, it's not just about what you're learning inside a classroom. I mean, if you've got kids going to school who are hungry, who are living in poor accommodation, who aren't able to relax at home, to have that space. If you're sending those kids into schools, they're not going to be in the best place to learn. So then we go back to looking at the situations at home, and you're looking around social security. Now, obviously, Scotland and the Scottish government have got some elements of the social security. We've introduced the new child payment, which is an incredible first move. That I'm sure Alex welcomes as well. It's like, and we're the first place in the UK to do that. So we're doing amazing things like this. But when I'm looking at what we could be doing, what I always get really angry about is the fact that I know the hundreds of millions of pounds that we have to spend mitigating against cuts coming from Westminster into social security and welfare for the people living in areas who need the welfare state to be looking out for them. I campaigned on the 2-child cap and the rape clause. That policy isn't a thing in Scotland, but that's because the SNP government pay for it. The money we don't just get rid of the policy, it gets paid for. So the hundreds of millions of pounds that the SNP government are spending mitigating cuts coming, what I would like to see is us not have to do that, and to use that money and invest it into these communities and be doing some more proactive work to bring people out of poverty and to narrow the gap between the affluent areas in Edinburgh Western or anywhere in Scotland and the less well-off areas as well. These are the things that are going to be bringing that gap smaller and smaller.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you very much, Sarah. A question, do you want to ask a question now, David?
Sure, from some of the ones that have come in this evening. What reassurance can Sarah give that the SNP would not use a majority position in the Parliament to force an unlawful separation with the UK?
Yep, I think I'll take that, Alex. Yeah, I mean, I think the First Minister has been very clear about, in terms of getting an independence referendum and hopefully winning that independence referendum, that I think everyone wants to see that done legally. When we win independence, I do not want anyone to be able to argue with that. I would like to do it lawfully. I would like to do it with the agreement that we all need in order to make sure that no one can disagree with this. So I know the First Minister is of the same opinion as that and has said that publicly before. When we have our next referendum, it needs to be done so that it cannot be argued with.
you want me to come in? Well, I just want to say, if there's
I could ask you a specific question if you like, because I've got one here that's just for you.
I was about to be very nice about Sarah there, but okay, by all means, but can I just be nice about Sarah before you do? If there's a battle for the soul of the SNP right now, then I hope that Sarah's sides win it, because that's the reasoned and reasonable approach to democratic change. I think that there is a wing of the SNP which is growing in strength, which I really worry about, which would potentially force an illegal referendum through. I mean, at the end of the day, Sarah and I will argue the toss about a referendum. I don't think that our country has the appetite for it because it is exhausted and we need to put the recovery first. Sarah disagrees with that. That's fine. But one thing I think we both agree on is that democracy really, really matters. Sorry, Chair.
So the question to you is, if you're a keen European, why would you not want to give Scotland a chance to rejoin the EU in our lifetime? And that's from Vivian.
It's a great question, Vivian, and I do, and I want to, and I hope it's within our lifetime, but it's as part of the UK, because I don't think that independence is the lifeboat to European membership that the SNP would have you believe. And for all the accession criteria I've talked about, the length of time, the austerity that we would have to impose on ourselves. Sarah talks about very eloquently, I think, about addressing poverty. But you can't do that if you're having to pay down a structural deficit of 8%, 5% gap above the Maastricht conversion criteria. The other thing is that all the problems that were associated with the Ireland situation would be associated with Scotland, but the difference would be nobody would really mind because we don't have a civil war in Scotland. So there would be a hard border between Scotland and the UK, and very possibly the euro. Now, you might think both of those are fine. I'm not comfortable with that. And at the very end of the day, you know, I'm just going to take this head on because people often paint this as a choice between two unions. I don't really accept that. But if I have to choose between two unions, you know what? I choose the UK. And I'll tell you why. Because at the end of the day, I have more in common with somebody in Bristol than I do with somebody in Barcelona. We live on the same archipelago of islands. We need the same solutions. We speak the same language. We have the same culture and history. And yet, I will fight the rest of my life to get this country, these countries back into the European Union, but it's not for me through independence.
Thank you very much. Do you have a question, David?
Sure. Another one that's come in this evening. Following Brexit, the EU structural funding, which was managed in Scotland by the Scottish Government, is being replaced by the UK Government Shared Prosperity Fund. What is your view about UK Government's decision to administer it directly, bypassing the Scottish Government?
Sorry, Alex, this would be for you.
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, and I'm sure Sarah will agree with me on this, that what this whole episode demonstrates is that we need a dispute resolution procedure across this union. Because right now there is, I think, a problem there. I don't see this as a power grab. I welcome spending in Scotland, but at the same time, we have devolved control over a lot of the areas where that money will be spent. However, it wasn't powers that we had. We looked to the European Union for funding in those areas before, and I think with a proper dispute resolution, with a proper arrangement on that basis, we can make it work to Scotland's benefit.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there'll be no surprise here. I do see it as a power grab. I think it comes back for me to the fundamental question of why. Why are you bypassing the Scottish Government in order to do this? I have not heard a reasoned argument for why anyone's doing that, other than the fact they don't want to deal with the Scottish Government and they don't want to give us that power. There's no reason for it not to come to us. Absolutely none whatsoever. And Mike Russell articulates this a lot better than I ever will. But until I hear a genuine answer to why this is not coming here, the answer to me is that they just want to keep this power and they don't want to give it to the Scottish Government. Where, if you believe in localism and devolving power down, why not give it to the Scottish Government, who can then handle it in the way that they handle other devolved matters?
Thank you. And this is a question from Tony, who actually asked his question first, and it's a good one. So he says, I've recently retired. Despite paying into a company pension for 40 years, I need a state pension to augment this. Our state pension is only 29% of the average earnings, and EU average by comparison is 70%. What can you do to remedy this disparity? That will go to Sarah first.
Thank you. It was actually something that I found out a lot about. I was doing research, I think it was a few years, because I hadn't, believe it or not, thought about pensions that much up until that point in my life. And I was doing research on this, and I could not believe the disparity that I was seeing and how low the UK government pension settlement is. I genuinely don't understand it. And even Ireland has got, I can't remember the number that Ireland has now, but it's far higher than what we've got. I don't know why what is going on, but it's one of the, and I know pensions, when back in 2014, when we were discussing independence, was one of the things that was spoken about, that it was going to be under threat. I actually think we could seize this opportunity there and be doing something, be having pensions, state pensions for people that are on par with the rest of Europe. So I do not understand why the UK government has set the bar so low, but I say that one of the ways to fix this problem is to have control over our pensions and be able to actually do that.
Thank you. Alex.
This is a great question. I mean, do you know what? This isn't just about money, it's about dignity. There's a wonderful book by a clinician in America called Atul Gawande called Being Mortal, and about what life medicine, what matters at the end. And he puts an assessment of the needs of people in older age. And money's actually very lower down that. And I will come on to money. I don't have a lot of sympathy with the question and the importance of increasing that. But it's about entitlements and assurance, and the fact that you know that you will have access to the basic necessities in terms of decent housing, heat and food and utilities. But above that, you'll have choice. You'll have access to the things that made you an individual, make you a person. And all of these things are not just about money, but they're about, but public policy can have an influence on that. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, were it up to me and you know, when LibDems were in coalition government, we did actually improve the lot of state pensions, but only by a fraction of what the sort of gap that we're talking about here. But independence isn't the solution to this. I mean, if we become independent, and Scots pensioners will need to have pensions funded by a newly independent Scottish government. Now, there is absolutely, I salute and I share your aspiration to get it on a par with our other European nations. But hang on, we've just also talked about rejoining the European Union as an absolute priority. Okay, I agree with that too. But you can't have both. You cannot have both. Because if we're going to have to pay down a structural deficit of 8.6%, then we're going to have to make some really, really serious cuts. There's no new money. There's no more money that's flooding around. It's certainly not going to pensioners. You're going to have to decide what services to cut and what taxes to put up. And those two things are incompatible, I'm afraid.
David.
Yeah, sure. So one that came in advance from Gary. Scottish politics has become an absolute cesspit, from dangerous conspiracy theories without any basis to downright nasty exchanges between groups of people. Are politicians who use Twitter in any way responsible for this vitriolic atmosphere? And what will you do as an elected MSP to improve public discourse?
Alex, I will go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm one to talk, aren't I? I was caught on camera saying something very unpleasant about an SNP minister, for which I unreservedly apologise again. I think, you know, I let the emotions get the better of me, but I was wrong, and my mother brought me up with better manners than that. So apologies. Listen, I carry an attack alarm. I didn't ask for it. The police came to see me and said, on an unsolicited basis, we've been watching your Twitter content and the reactions you get and the comments you get, and some of the sort of ethnically charged stuff about your English background, and we want you to carry this attack alarm. It's a bit scary, but okay. It would mean more if I remember to charge it up and take it out, but nevertheless, it's symptomatic of the hatred in Scottish politics, and it is a hatred, and it wasn't always like this. It wasn't always like this. Now, you guys are on the yes side of the divide. I get that. You had a different experience of the first referendum, but actually, you know, if it wasn't necessarily the festival of democracy that you guys all experienced, there was argy-bargy on both sides. I absolutely accept that, and I call it out from the British nationalist community, who are abhorrent, but there's a lot of that in the Scottish national community as well. There was a survey done after the 2014 referendum that says that 1 in 4 people had an irreparably damaged relationship with a friend or close family member because of being on either side of the yes-no divide, and that is where we are. There is this elephant in the room. For as long as this constitutional issue is sat here and we're stuck in this 2014 yes-no divide, we're going to have this hatred. And yeah, okay, sometimes I give it out on Twitter as well. I always try and be respectful. I don't offer abuse, but I am barbed and I am critical. But I'm an opposition politician, and Twitter is a bit more of a sort of blood sport sometimes. But nevertheless, you know, I reflect, and I have reflected over the last few years about my own content, and you've got to set an example. I was a youth worker for 19 years, and I remember how important it was to instill in the young people that we worked with those values of respect and reaching for common ground. And as Sarah and I are doing tonight, just trying to find that which unites us more than what divides us.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah. It's something that I really, really care quite passionately about. And you know, I've been asked lots and lots of times since becoming a candidate, why do I want to be a politician? And it can sometimes be quite difficult to answer that question. And I think that's mainly because when I look and see certain politicians and their behaviours, or even the way that they're getting treated, none of that seems appealing. The answer in my head is because I want being a politician not to just look like that, and I want to be able to do it differently. So I want a different answer to the question, basically, you know, and I will always try and conduct myself with respect, and, you know, and make sure that what I'm putting out is not in any way contributing to the toxic environment that people are seeing. I was doing an event a couple of weeks back with Parliament 50/50 about young women, not and all women, to be fair, standing in politics. And it's getting more and more difficult to be able to say hand on heart to women, I think you should come forward, don't worry, everything's fine, everything's safe. And I don't want it to be like that. I don't want one of the biggest factors I know that played in my head and other people's heads when they're putting themselves forward to be, can you deal with this? Can you just put up with it because it's part and parcel of the job? You know, I was always taught from a young age, if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. So, you know, sometimes maybe it's best to just not say anything. But I mean, I will genuinely say that one of my fears is, it was 2017, not that long ago, 2017, that we lost an MP, Joe Cox. And it was fueled by underlying movements like this, building and building and building. And for a wee while, people took notice of that, a very short-lived while. And I fear that people have forgotten that, and I really, really don't want it to have to take something as tragic as that happening again for everyone to go, oh, actually, remember when we said be kind? Yeah, that. Let's get back to that. So I will try, I will do everything within my power to make sure the discourse that I'm having and continue to put out there is not contributing to that. And sometimes that means taking a break from Twitter or not doing that. And if that's the case, that's the case.
Thank you very much. I think that's us just about out of time. We had lots of other questions, so I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. And so yes, we can have 2 minutes each to sum up. I will reset my timer. Oh, sorry. I don't know how to use my timer anymore. I've been in the out of the lab for so long. So 2 minutes each, and Alex, you can go first this time. So,
well, thank you, Chair. And can I say, hand on heart, thank you, Sarah. This has been a lovely and good-natured discussion. I hope it sets the tone for all of our discussions and debates for the rest of the campaign. I believe it will, and I'm very heartily glad as a result of it. As I said at the top of the meeting, I love my job. Nothing about it disappoints me. I love every community of West Edinburgh, and I try and spend as much time here as possible. I made the mistake once of telling my wife it's 17 minutes doorway to doorway from the Parliament to the constituency. She phones me 20 minutes after the vote to ask where I am, but I love that because I cannot wait to get back to West Edinburgh at the end of the day. I live in Blackhall. My kids grow up here. They go to local schools. My issues are your issues. And I have knocked, in the last year, actually, in the 6 months between August and December, I knocked 4,000 doors. I've knocked 30,000 doors since I was elected. And I keep knocking doors because I get my instructions from you guys and I learn what matters to you and what the local issues are you face. Those bread and butter pavement politic issues make me tick, and it has been the privilege of my life throughout this emergency, through one of the darkest years of any of our lives, to have been able to offer a public service, to say, this is what these changes mean for you, and to respond very quickly to requests for clarity and for help. I've helped, since the emergency began, I've helped more people in the last year than in the previous 4 years combined. And do you know what? I love every minute of it. I leap out of bed, sometimes at 5 in the morning, just to do emails, to do casework emails, because it feels like somebody's waiting for an answer. So please put your trust in me again. I love my job and I want to keep doing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah. Oh, sorry. I don't know how to stop it now. And Sarah, if you want to go.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, sorry.
Almost got through the entire thing without somebody being on mute. Thank you. And thank you very much. And Alex, again, thank you back at you. It's nice to be able to have kind of debate in a really nice, friendly atmosphere as well. And it's what I hope that we can continue to do. Maybe we can be two of the people that lead by example and something like this. Thank you to everyone else who's joined tonight as well. If you didn't get a chance to ask your questions or end up thinking later on of something, which is usually what I do, then please get in touch. My email is pretty public. It's on all my social media platforms and stuff. And failing that, I'm sure the organisers can also pass it along. So please do get in touch. And it's genuinely been a brilliant evening. So thank you. My favourite part of every election that I've been involved in is speaking to people. Probably more specifically, actually listening to people about what they care about what they're passionate about. It's the best part. And whether that be on the doors or at hustings or in somewhere like the little bakery that, usually jumping in to try and dry off and heat up after a day of campaigning in our glorious Scottish weather. So I've been really disappointed that none of us can do that side of the campaigning just now. And tonight feels a little bit more like I'm getting to do that. So it's been really nice. I hope that you found out a little bit more about me and about what electing an SNP MSP for Edinburgh Western could do for you and for this amazing part of our city. As I said in kind of my opening remarks, this election is about who you think can best seize the opportunities that lie ahead of us now, who has the vision to create the type of place that you want to live. Since being in government, the SNP have used our powers to try and do what's best for this country. We've transformed education, strengthened our NHS, created a new social security system, built thousands of affordable homes. We've made Scotland's tax system the most progressive in the UK and led the way on the climate crisis. So a vote for the SNP this May is a vote to see that work being built on. And most crucially, it's a vote to have that right to decide what our future should be.
Thank you. You've got a few extra seconds because of your muting. Thank you very much to both the candidates who have been excellent this evening, and yes, it's nice to have a friendly debate. So I'll pass over to Morag now to finish off the proceedings.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Alex. That was just really, really interesting, and thank you for your very clear and well-considered answers. And thanks to everyone for sending your questions in. And again, I'm sorry if your question didn't get asked. There were so many good ones, and we hope we've achieved a bit of a balance with the questions. Certainly, it's been. Well, I hope candidates also have found it quite useful to be able to air those issues and basically, you know, find out what people are concerned about. And it's been, we feel as though we're kind of slightly ahead of the game here. It's quite early to be doing a hustings, but certainly, you know, there's a lot of people taking part and they have very much appreciated the opportunity. So thank you, thanks ever so much. I'm just going to do a wee plug for our upcoming events. There'll be another webinar in the middle of March, and we have a social event on the 6th of March, and you can find out about that on our social media. So all I can say is thanks again. Really appreciate it. Tell me if there's anything else I've forgotten to say. Thanks to everybody for taking part, and hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.